I think we've got everybody in from the waiting room. So welcome to the Actuary chat. Today we have with us Matthew Lewis, who is a 2009 grad, and he is a senior actuary with Nationwide. So he's going to share a little bit about his career and what it is that he does, and some information on how to get from being a center student into that career field. So thank you, Matthew, for being here.
Oh, thanks very much. It's my pleasure. So a lot of the Nationwide you'll see on TV is mostly about more of the car insurance or home insurance, but there's a whole other half to Nationwide that's more focused on life insurance and retirement. And so it's kind of split into property and casualty that a lot of the commercials you see on TV, and then Nationwide Financial, which is where I work. And when I was at Center, I was an economics major and a math minor. And by the time around my sophomore to junior year, I decided I wanted to work on Wall Street. I wanted to be an investment banker. I didn't really have anything more specific in mind than that. To me, it was kind of a prestigious and well-paid way to use economics and math. That's kind of all I knew at the time. I didn't have any kind of idea of what actual work I'd be doing. So I wasn't super focused, I guess you could say. But I started and I was trying to get an internship on Wall Street for the summer after my junior year, and got pretty far along in the process until one day I just kind of stopped hearing back from the company I was working with. That company was Lehman Brothers, and between my last interview and when I was supposed to find out a decision, the little financial crisis happened and they went out of business and there wasn't any internship program anymore. So I was left before what I thought was a really important summer in my college career to kind of prepare for the future. And I didn't really have anything to do. This was, I think, March. And so I went to talk to Dr. Perry, who had just started at the time, and he'd been an actuary before he went back to get his PhD in economics. And so he thought that I might as well go and try and see if there are any internships left open. And even if I didn't want to do that long term, it would be something good to look on a resume for other careers, better than basically doing nothing for a summer. So I sent out basically 30 resumes and letters that night and heard back from Anthem in Louisville. And there was kind of like a lot of lucky circumstances that went into it. Their previous intern that they'd offered something to that fell through, so they had an opening that basically shouldn't really have been still available in March. And the hiring manager was actually a former Center grad, so I kind of had two really lucky things going for me. And so Anthem is a health insurance company. And so I went there really without having even heard the term actuary very much before my conversation with Dr. Perry. And so I learned a lot that summer about kind of what it was going to take to become an actuary, and kind of the work that was involved with it. There was some complex problems, and it was enjoyable. And I really liked that I didn't have to go back to school right away. I liked getting out and making money basically right away was kind of what I really wanted to do at the time. And so when I got back from my internship, I started studying for the first actuarial exam. There are 8 formal actuarial exams and then a lot of other kind of extra classes and things you have to take along the way. And passed one of those while I was still at Center. And at the time, kind of having one exam before you graduated to get a job was kind of like the bare minimum. So I went back to work for Anthem and worked there for 4 years and passed more exams along the way. But I wasn't really passionate about the work at all. And I kind of wanted something a little bit more challenging. And so I was looking for a step up. So I went to work for an actuarial consulting firm, still doing health related things, but now it was much more of doing them for a lot of different companies and really kind of interacting and working more on, communication skills and things like that. But still at the root of it, I wasn't really excited about the actual work. And I knew that I'd always wanted to do what at this point I've come to call quantitative analytics, which is kind of what I wanted to do in college, but not something I knew enough to put a name to it. And so that's when I saw a job posting at Nationwide. And it definitely wasn't what I'm doing now, but it was something kind of further along the path to the rigorous quantitative work I wanted to do. So when I applied and got in touch with their hiring council, I heard they kind of went through the different departments that their company, that the actuarial team was involved with, and they mentioned the hedging team, and kind of suddenly everything clicked for me, where it was something that's exactly what I wanted to do, and I never really realized that would be available to me here in Ohio, that kind of work. And so if you take nothing else away from today, I think it's really important to realize that you can find the kind of work you want to do in kind of unexpected places sometimes. Like when I was in college, I never would have expected to be able to do basically quantitative investment work for a life insurance company, basically. And so what my half Nationwide does is they cater basically to people that are saving for retirement. And they sell plans where basically, say you have $100,000 saved for retirement, you give it to Nationwide, and Nationwide says, we're going to keep that money safe for you because you could invest it yourself in the stock market. Say you could buy $100,000 worth of Apple, and you could make a lot of money, but say Apple goes out of business, you could lose everything. So Nationwide's going to try and provide some growth, but with a lot of protection as well. And so they sell these arrangements where, so we're going to talk for, say, the next year, we're going to keep your $100,000 safe. You're never going to lose that. But say the stock market does really well, and say it goes up by 5% over the next year. Then after a year, we're going to credit your account by $5,000 or 5% of basically as if you were invested in the stock market the whole time. But if the stock market goes down over the next year, then you don't lose anything. So basically you only get kind of upside potential. And so everyone else in Nationwide thinks of these things as just kind of, annuity type product features. But anyone that's taken investment classes at Center probably recognize these as financial derivatives, specifically call options. So kind of real and sophisticated financial instruments. And so what my team at Nationwide does is that whenever Nationwide sells a policy, that call option, that derivative, that kind of financial promise goes in our books as a liability. And that liability will change in value based on how the stock market performs. So the stock market goes up, kind of that value of that promise increases. So the liability on our books increases. And so we want to create a hedge asset that will also move up and down with the stock market in the same way. So that no matter what happens in the stock market, whether it goes way up or way down, kind of the balance between our assets and liabilities won't change. And the way all that is calculated, the way we determine that hedge asset is through a lot of modeling and a lot of simulations and actually a lot of math. And so the way it works is it's all based on basically partial differential equations. And so basically you figure out, I'm going to value this option, this liability that we've sold to the policyholder over a vast array of different possible outcomes over the next year. And then we do a little shocks. Well, now, so what if the stock market goes up? What if it goes down? And then we see how that value we calculated changes. So that's how we kind of know what those sensitivities are, what we base our hedging portfolio on. And so I kind of hear myself rambling a little bit, so I'm going to stop and see if there are any particular questions kind of about basically any traditional actuarial jobs or how to get to do traditional actuarial work, or kind of my more specialized actuarial domain that I find myself in now.
So please don't be shy. This is your chance. You're obviously interested in possible actuary career since you came. So this is your chance to get some information from someone working knee deep in the field.
So I have a question about the job itself.
Sure.
I don't know much about what an actuary does, but from what you're saying, if this is right, you're trying to calculate the liability for the insurance company that you work for?
So there's kind of, so actuaries become like a really kind of all-encompassing title that kind of gets assigned to a lot of different jobs. Even at Nationwide, I think we have something like 200 actuaries working in just my half, and we're all called actuaries. We all do kind of very, very different things. And so there are some actuaries that work on valuing kind of the actual, if it's a life insurance, the actual kind of when, the life insurance pays off, the value of that piece. Whereas my team is really specifically working at how basically interest is going to get credited to their account value over time. And so my part, I don't deal with any kind of mortality or morbidity or anything like that. I'm focused just on how the financial markets will impact it. But there are definitely other actuaries that are definitely more concerned with, the type of person we're selling the policy to and things like that. And so I don't value the entire liability. I just value that particular, what we call embedded option that we've sold. So basically we've sold call options or put options to the policyholder in kind of the guise of an annuity contract or a life insurance policy. And my job is to focus on just that kind of market specific piece.
Okay, thank you. So would you say that you used more of your like economics background or your math background from Center, or like a combination of both?
I definitely think that the economics gives a lot of context to what I do, and the math gives me the tools to actually do it, if that makes any sense. And then also the additional training through the actuarial program also helps facilitate a lot of that, because there are courses and tests on probability and financial mathematics and some what we call stochastic partial differential equations, which is kind of, I guess, as far as you can call a differential equations problem normal, there's an additional complexity where there's also some randomness assigned to it. So it's where you get the stochastic part. So I think it's definitely a good combination, but the more important kind of coursework I would say would be the math side, and particular courses to focus on for kind of my job specifically, and would help a lot with some of the examinations would be differential equations, probability, and linear algebra, actually.
Okay, I'm gonna ask one more question if no one has.
Keep going, no problem.
So I guess like I'm still kind of trying to figure out, like, on a day-to-day basis, what are you doing in your job?
So before I get into that, I would say that I'm very much a non-traditional actuary at this point. So what I'm going to talk about is definitely more financial engineering than what most actuaries would be working on. So I kind of have two main functions on the team. I do our variable annuity hedge trading execution, and I'm also responsible for our real world economic scenario generator. And so the first piece is I create basically trading instructions that we send down to our stock market traders that work in our building. And basically I give them these instructions that say, if the S&P 500 goes up by this amount, or goes down by this amount, or this amount, or if, say, the 10-year treasury rate changed by this amount or this amount, then we need to rebalance our market positions by kind of exactly this amount. And so I do that by, we have access to this kind of huge computing grid that basically runs every single policy we have that has one of these embedded derivatives. And we basically say, what are kind of 50,000 possible economic futures? What are all the different ways that the stock market could go up or down over the next 30 years, starting from exactly where we are today? And so we do that for, say, 50,000 simulations for every single individual policy. And so then what we do is, well, okay, so say today the S&P is at 3,600. Well, what if today it was at 3,700? So we're going to change the stock market. We're going to change the stock level by 100, and then we're going to do the exact same thing, but starting from a new starting point. And then we're going to say, okay, we're going to take the results of all those 50,000 simulations, and we're going to average them and bring them back to today. So we're going to have one value for the current market level and one value for, well, what if it was $100 higher? So then we know for a change of 100 in the S&P, this is what the change in the option value is. And so that's kind of where the kind of calculus comes in. You can see those kind of, we're going to compare those rate of changes. And so that's how we're going to say, okay, so this is how much so we know that the actual stock itself is going to go up by 1 if the stock goes up by 1. But if the stock goes up by 1, then we see that, oh, the option value is going to go up by, say, 0.4 instead. So we see how they're going to change. That's how we know that how much we need to actually invest in the stock market to kind of mirror those changes up and down. And so it's a lot of kind of computing work, a little programming, and then kind of compiling the results to send down to our traders.
I'll ask a question if nobody else has one. So you said that like you have to pass the 8 exams and then there's training. Can you talk more about that and what that entails?
So they're kind of split up into 2 different sections because you get 2 different designations along the path to being kind of a fully credentialed actuary. The first is you can become an associate in the Society of Actuaries, and that includes, I think it's basically 5 exams. And there's one on probability, one on financial mathematics, one on more specific kind of, it's called life contingencies. So a lot of actual kind of mortality-based things, modeling, and there's one new one that I can't remember. And so you have to pass those 5 exams, and then you have to show that you've done some college work on economics, corporate finance, and financial modeling. And if you don't have those courses on your transcript, then they're kind of courses you can go through online to get those qualifications. And then there's a series of modules you have to go through, which is basically you do a lot of reading, you go through a lot of PowerPoints, and then you do kind of a written assessment that's like 5 to 10 pages for each of those 3 modules. And then you come up with a presentation and you have to go to a conference, and then you get your ASA. And at that point, you pick kind of a specialization when you go forward. There are tests for life and annuity, there are tests for health insurance, there are tests for quantitative risk management, which is what I do. There are tests for property and casualty, and then a general insurance classification. And so then once you pick one of those paths, you take 3 additional tests, but specific to your discipline. And then there are 3 more modules that go along with that. So basically 3 more sets of reading and papers to go through, and then a capstone project that Dean presents to kind of a judging committee at a conference to get your final fellowship in the Society of Actuaries. And so normally I think it takes anywhere between 6 to 10 years to fully finish everything. And the way the kind of competition for entry-level spots has increased, and a lot of colleges have their own actuarial science programs. Most places kind of have a cutoff of at least having 2 exams passed before they'll take you on as an entry-level employee, but they're kind of less strict on kind of internships and things like that.
I want to ask a follow-up question about that as far as internships go. You know, a lot of what I've heard is they want students to have passed at least the first exam in order to do an internship. But if a student is not quite certain enough that they want to be an actuary in order to make that commitment, what are some good experiences they could get for undergraduate internships?
So I think basically not having an actuarial science program will help explain a little bit of not having exams when you go to apply for internships. But I don't know if there's going to be a lot of opportunities for kind of exploratory internships because of the kind of competitiveness of the field, because a lot of the programs you kind of get drilled into, you pass these exams, you pass at least 3 before you graduate, and you kind of have to have an internship or you're not going to get hired. There's a lot of kind of a little bit of forced competitiveness. And so if you basically don't have the exam and can't kind of demonstrate that you're passionate, it's kind of the wrong word, but more than a little interested, I guess, then I would find it difficult to prove competitive, kind of all else being equal, when you're being compared to students that have exams and are in programs that are kind of already demonstrating their kind of interest in long-term future.
Thank you, that's helpful.
No problem.
So any final questions?
It's definitely not impossible to pass exams during college, even if you're not in courses that are specifically designed to get you to pass those courses. You might be a little bit of a disadvantage against the people in traditional courses. But I actually set up during my senior year for center term, I did an independent study, basically in actuarial science is what we called it, so that I could just take the month and study for the first exam. Was how I went about kind of getting around, fitting it in with everything else.
Great information today. Any final questions from the students? All right, Matthew, any final thoughts or final pieces of advice?
I don't know if there's a chat or if I'm going to put my email address in here. So feel free for anyone in the chat now or anyone that watched this later and you have any more questions, feel free to reach out. If you have resumes and real interest and want me to pass you along to our recruiting committee that does internships and things like that, I'd be happy to. Or if you wanted to kind of talk more about actuarial work or financial engineering or kind of any other kind of ways to use center degrees in a more quantitative field, I'd be happy to talk any further.
And I would definitely encourage you to take advantage of that because as Matthew said, it is a competitive field to get into. So the more contacts you have, the better your chances are going to be with that. Okay. Well, thank you so much, Matthew. This has been very, very helpful. Please join me in thanking him very much for all his information today.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much. All right, you all have a great rest of your day.